Testing, testing. I'm not hearing me, but okay, good. And we're not getting feedback. Oh, we weren't. That's why I think it might be a mechanical issue. Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't look at all good.
I don't know that we need that. Testing, testing. Testing.
Are we recording, or do I need to do that?
It's going.
Okay, good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go ahead and call to order this hearing of April 15th, 2025 for WLD 2024-023 Lewis River Townhomes. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the city's hearings examiner. I'll start with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow so everyone understands how you can participate in the hearing today. I start by saying I'm not a city employee. I'm licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner. I serve under contract at City Council. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me today. My role as the hearings examiner is to conduct public hearings and make decisions about certain land use matters in the city of Woodland. In making those decisions, I'm required to apply the city's existing laws. I'm not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with City Council and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings examiner, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker, and I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. I have not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But you have the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. I have visited the site just because I got here earlier than expected because traffic was light. I drove down whatever the road is that leads to the site. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Drove down there to the end, turned around, drove back, saw the pile of fill that, and the storm facility that's there, or the thing coming, the concrete thing coming out of the manhole. That's the word I was looking for. But anybody wants to challenge my impartiality or ask me what I observed or thought I observed during my site visit, you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I'll start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the city's website. Then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report. Then if anybody else wants to say something about this application, in support, in opposition, or with questions or concerns, they may do so. Once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I'll give staff and the applicant alone the opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If those responses include any new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I'll close the public portion of the hearing without any further input. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the public record. I'll send my decision to the city. The city will send it to parties of record. So anybody who testifies orally or in writing before the close of the hearing will be sure and receive a copy of my decision when it's issued. If you decide you don't need to testify but want to be sure and receive a copy of my decision, you can give staff your name and contact information and they'll add you to the list. When you testify, please come on up to the podium here. We need to make sure you're on a microphone. Our hearings are recorded, and that's part of our record in the event of an appeal. Please begin your testimony by stating your name and your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. There's no arbitrary limit to the length of time you can testify, but testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria. And also, please don't repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. Repeating your testimony doesn't make your case any stronger. The only issue before me is whether the application does or does not comply with the approval criteria. It is important that all parties make their best case to me. My decisions are final for purposes of the city, but may be appealed to Superior Court. However, the court generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. They'll decide any appeal based on the record before me. So if you feel it's important that myself or any future decision maker knows something about this application, you need to make sure it gets into the record before me. In order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me with enough specificity that people can understand what the issue is. If anyone feels they need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have an opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. But if anybody wants me to hold the record open or continue the hearing, you must make that request before the close of the hearing today and provide some support for why whatever you wanted to submit during the open record or continuance, why that information couldn't be submitted at the hearing today. That concludes my introduction. Mr. Goddard?
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. My name is Travis Goddard. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Woodland, and the presentation that you have before you today is for the Lewis River Townhomes subdivision within the shoreline of the Lewis River. What you see before you is a vicinity map of the property. You can see, sorry, I don't have my laser, but it's just south of the CC Street Bridge between Sandalwood and the Lewis River. It's 5.56 acres, medium density residential zoning, and the proposal is 39 townhome lots. There's a stormwater tract, a riparian tract, and a recreation open space tract with a temporary roundabout in it. The Sandalwood, as you drove this morning, was kind of a funky little gravel approach that goes mostly to the wastewater treatment plant, although the DOT airport is also on Sandalwood. And it is adjacent to the I-5 northbound off-ramp, and it will be relocated to the east along the boundary line of this property. So it's shown on the site plan, and that's one of the things I need to point out. And then the internal street is proposed for private and the Public Works Department has indicated that they are fine with that being private.
Oh, okay.
So that was not necessarily reflected in the engineering comments, but the engineer is on vacation this week, so I wanted to confirm that as designed, they may have some final engineering discussion to negotiate that as part of the final engineering process, whether there's adequate curve returns for the turns and that kind of stuff. In theory, it is accepted the way it's proposed, but the final engineering will hammer those details out. So I wanted to clarify that and give the applicant a chance to respond to that. The next slide I have for you is covers the planning the zoning related stuff: minimum lot sizes, maximum lot sizes, lot width, building height, which will be ultimately decided at the building permit stage. But this is all reflected in conditions, and the proposal does meet all of the standards, including the limit of 10 units in a single townhome building. This is the latest version of the site plan. You can see the buildings indicated in the red with the temporary turnaround, which was not on the original site plan or the one that I showed here. So just for clarification, this is available on the website, and it is also available in Cloud Permit. I believe it's a 12-page set of plans that we're referring to. So I'll cover some of the issues that were raised during the review, and this is the floodplain, and what you see here is the approach to the CC River Bridge, which was installed in 1966, and so the floodway is approximately this line here. This project will not affect the floodway. This is also a mapped flood zone, but the applicant was given a permit to install fill in the mid to late 2000s, and they indicated that they thought they had gotten FEMA documentation that it had been removed from the floodplain, like a LOMAR, but I have not seen that. So there are conditions in there that require them to comply with the flood protection ordinance, and if that includes the producing documents from FEMA indicating that it has been removed from the floodplain, that would satisfy the flood protection ordinance. So the critical areas, we agree with the applicant that it is an isolated riparian habitat and that they have placed the area in a conservation tract. I also point out that through accretion, so the deposition from the river, there is additional land between what the owners own and the river, and that is not part of this subdivision, but it theoretically is buffered from this project by the tract that they are talking about. And then they have proposed a mitigation and enhancement plan for the protection of that area. There are some constraints because that was initially installed in 1938 when they realigned the river, and they installed the airport, and Horseshoe Lake became Horseshoe Lake. So that was a designed construction build, and there's various reports of riprap from various sizes on that bank the entire length. And so we recognize that there is a limited ability to even do mitigation on that bank because any significant planting might affect the integrity of that bank. So part of me says let sleeping dogs lie, but they have proposed mitigation for habitat enhancement. So the critical areas, as you noted, there is a manhole, or the top part of a manhole that you can see down there. There is a question about whether that is wetland. You can see in the aerial photograph that there is a wet spot that can be shown, but it is part of a man-made drainage facility. That's why it's there. It infiltrates water and allows it to drain into the soil. And also I have pictures of it, I believe in Cloud Permit, actually with agricultural equipment, and I believe that was 2002 was when I last had pictures of that site being mowed.
Okay.
So, but to give you a little better context, you can see this is from the CC Street. It's elevated considerably, but you can see kind of in the middle of that picture, there's the manhole, there's the wet spot, and off to the right is the berm with I-5 in the background there. The aviation overlay, what you see here is a picture of the that was sent to us from DOT Transportation. The project appears to stick out quite a bit into Zone 1, Zone 2, and it's in Zone 3, but there are no structures in Zone 1, Zone 2, and the conditions requested by the DOT Aviation Division have been attached. And I inserted this copy of the site plan, which shows that they overlaid the aerial district, so they have kept the buildings out of Zone 1 and Zone 2 as requested by the Aviation Division. But they also recognize that those are guidelines and that ultimately the decision is up to the local jurisdiction. We included some conditions that were above and beyond what they asked. Specifically, during the final engineering process, we are going to coordinate with them for some type of street lighting, because the last thing we want is street lights, and also the last thing we want it to look like is an extension of the runway by having lights that continue in the same direction. So eliminating street trees and some alternate form of lighting, whether that's bollards or something, we will work that out as part of the final engineering process. Also, by pure coincidence, my permit technician is a pilot in training, and so she took the opportunity I requested for her to do a takeoff and a landing at the Woodland Airport, so she can provide some testimony about the height that she was at when you get to this point in the takeoff. So if you're interested in that, you can ask her about that.
Okay.
So there are some other issues associated with this, and that is the internal private road is okay, provided the easements are provided for public access and utilities. That'll be part of the final engineering, just to make sure that there's access and utility easements for public infrastructure, because it will be internal. Also, Sandalwood will be constructed, as I mentioned, to connect to CC Street at this point at a T intersection, but there's also a condition that requires that they coordinate with the Exit 21 design engineers, because we are looking at rebuilding that intersection, and this approach would be kind of right on the boundary of that design. So we don't know whether we would need a right turn decel lane or a right turn right of way donation, so that we would be able to get people to take a right onto Sandalwood if it's coming through that intersection. So we recognize that we will accommodate this development, but we'll need to make sure that that design works. Stormwater is provided, and by the time of final engineering, it'll meet our stormwater ordinance. Erosion control has been proposed, and the final engineering plan will include erosion control measures necessary. And floodplain review, as I mentioned, will be required unless they can show the LOMAR that no additional floodplain review will be required with each of the individual buildings. As a subdivision, they do mitigate for schools, parks and recreation, fire protection, and so those will be impact fees. There's also going to be transportation impact fees. I'm not sure why I deleted that one, but I must have missed a slide when I created this. Also, police protection will be paid with the property owners coming in, so there's no impact fee for that, but it'll also be mitigated through the new levies. Department of Ecology comments and Fish and Wildlife comments are included in the record. Floodplain, critical area, solid waste management, water quality concerns, those are all addressed through conditions of approval, and the Fish and Wildlife concerns have been addressed through the mitigation and enhancement plan to staff's satisfaction. And so with that, staff finds that as conditioned, the proposal meets the applicable state and local codes, and we recommend approval with conditions.
Thank you. I just had a couple of clarification questions. Where and how is Sandalwood going to be abandoned? Is it Will there still be access to the airport and the water treatment plant, or will that whole intersection be eliminated with CC?
So I think that'll be part of the discussion for the final engineering. My assumption is it will remain in some capacity until construction is complete. Then it may just be access to the wastewater treatment plant, or it may be exit 21 ends up rebuilding that entire section. So
Just come down Sandalwood.
at exit 21 it'll be redone.
Okay,
And I can show you some preliminary plans for the exit 21 if you want to see those.
that's okay. Thanks, though. Are students from this subdivision going to walk or bike or bus to school?
Woodland is a busing district.
Okay. The applicant, this may be more for the applicant, or actually, no, it's for staff, but the remaining on-site oaks on lot 27, the dead and down wood is proposed to remain in place. Was there a condition to that effect and requiring notice to the owners of those lots? 26 and 27, because the debris, looks like one of the trees goes on to, overshadows 26 portion of it.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Typically, I would say yes, but given that this property is literally right in the floodway, typically you wouldn't necessarily want large woody debris in the floodway because it'll only
This
serve.
would be on the lots themselves.
Oh, then I'll leave the applicant to talk about
Okay.
that.
WashDOT said that, recommended a condition that basically notice about the airport. Is there a condition to that effect? There might be, I just didn't think to look.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's also in there for the notes for the face of the plat, along with the concerns about the public works wastewater treatment plant and
saw that.
potential for smells and lights and construction. So
Yeah.
I think they're right next to each other.
Okay. I just didn't, I wrote that in my notes, didn't think to go back and look. On page 2, it talks about a trail to the river. Is it going to go, there was some discussion about whether it's feasible to get to the river, or is it just along the river?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. The original proposal had a trail to the river, but instead they are doing the tract at the end by the turnaround,
Okay.
and we require that they have some kind of recreational activities and benches at that location.
Okay.
So there will be access overlooking.
Given the description,
Yes.
I wondered how they'd get it down there.
Yeah.
That answers that question, thanks. That did that one away. What does PURD stand for?
Planned Unit Residential Development.
Okay, I thought it might be, but I hadn't seen that one before. In page 3 of your staff report, there appears to be a typo. It talks about the water lines will be pre-placed, or is it replaced? I think both could be. Finding 3, existing water main 6 inches diameter must be pre-placed.
Replaced.
Okay. And the last one.
And also, while you're at that, there's something confusing in finding 3, and it's talking about tying into the main on the south side of
Mhm.
East CC Street, as opposed to ECC Street. So, just in case there's some confusion.
Okay, I read it as east. I figured that's what.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you raising it just in case. Oh, and that one went away. Okay, thank you. That's the only questions I had. The applicant, Mr. Sterling.
All right, good morning. I'm not used to having morning hearings, so I
Yes.
had to make sure and write down good morning, not good evening. My name is Joel Sterling. Last name is spelled Stirling. I am the owner and principal engineer for Sterling Design. We are the applicant. We manage the consultant team for the project, but my capacity here is the applicant leader and the engineering expert. We have a planning expert with us and also representation from Ecological Land Services, should there be any specific questions to environmental or to specific planning requirements. I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Goddard. We've been at this project for actually several years now. So there's been a number of staff changes at the City of Woodland, and we appreciate Mr. Goddard stepping in and finalizing the staff report, and we are here before the public and before you for approval. I will not go into a lot of detail. We accept working through the staff report approvals through final engineering. We know that there are always things like curb return, ADA ramps, centerline radiuses. Those are all parts of final engineering. We're prepared to address those along with the other conditions of approval. We recognize that the site is unique. Back in 1938, rules were different. You don't take a river in today's world and realign it. And one thing that Mr. Goddard said here this morning that I appreciate is the recognition that if you are relocating a water body like a river, it takes significant energy dissipation, which is typically in the form of rocks, large rocks, small rocks. It's known as riprap. So the riprap provides the ability for the river to retain its alignment, and it does provide a challenge for plantings and mitigation. We actually would not want to plant mitigation that would disturb that rock because that becomes a public safety issue. The river is realigned. We don't want it going back to its original alignment. So with that in mind, I would like to just say on the record, we are proposing habitat mitigation because we recognize the sensitivity of wildlife, the river. We want to be good stewards of those natural resources. However, the mitigation will be minimal, and it will recognize the engineered elements of the riverbank and the realignment that was done back in 1938. And I believe that that segues into your question on the woody debris. We will take that into account with our final engineering, with the final documents. Some of it likely will remain, but it may not all remain. So I know that we're working with Ecological Land Services, and they will guide us with it. But we also will look at it from the engineering perspective as safety, flood control, and making sure that we don't disrupt what was the purpose of the realignment.
Sure.
So,
Well, this was specific to lots 26 and 27, those trees that are on those lots, and any debris that falls onto those lots. So it shouldn't affect the riverbank itself, but it'll definitely affect those lots. You know, if I have big limbs in my backyard, I'm not likely to leave them.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious what the process is.
Yeah, our intent would be to leave the lot areas unencumbered.
Okay,
And
so those
if
they could remove.
They could remove it,
Okay.
and I would just say if we can relocate them to a place that is that functions well for the environment, we can do a win-win by maintaining that, but also recognizing that the lots do need to be available for building. One thing that was mentioned is we are coordinating with the overall realignment of the exit from the freeway. The talk about potentially having a deceleration lane, we do understand that, and we are on board with that. But I do want it to be noted in the record that this property we're working with does not have a lot of frontage on CC Street that would be to the west.
Mm-hmm.
So the deceleration lane, I'm not sure if that would apply to us.
No.
We wouldn't be able to dedicate any further right of way. That's all I'm, just want to point out that there are two parcels there. Sometimes they get lumped together, and we will do all we can within our abilities.
Sure.
Recognizing there's a bridge, there's a roundabout realignment, or we believe it'll be a roundabout. And I think that is all I have. As I mentioned before, I have other experts here that are available for questions if you have them, and I'm available for questions also.
Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Great, thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to say anything about this application? Yes, sir. Good morning.
My name is William Hewitt, Huyette, 404 East 15th, Vancouver, Washington, 98663. We're the purchaser of the property and working with Mr. Sturley to get it developed, and Mr. Goddard, who has just, had with his staff changes, just busted his tail to get this done, so we appreciate it. When we purchased the property, we relied on a site plan that was presented to the Woodland City Council that had 41 units on it. And going through the survey and the documentation and knowing that it's better to have some wastewater treatment facilities instead of a direct discharge, which is allowed now by stormwater by our
Wastewater doesn't
NPDES
like to go right
permit.
in the river.
We've kind of managed down two units. And the habitat area may pose some problems for us because we've had some problems with the cottonwood trees. They're quite large, and the tops have died and fell down across the road, and so we get a call from them, hey, come cut your trees out of the road. And so working with the state DOT on the airport, we've had to remove a couple of those because the airport is closed up basically and fenced. And so it has been good working with them because that's what allowed us to kind of design the units to accommodate, their needs. The process that Woodland's going through with Exit 21 will probably be long-term and extensive. I don't know when the state is going to fund that, and it's a combination of state funds and federal funds as I understand it, and Mr. Goddard could probably bring you up to date, but I think Kittleson is about 40% done with the design. So that it may conflict with our timing and their timing, but we'll work with Kittleson to make sure that that gets done properly. Doing things twice is not really on the agenda anymore, so I appreciate that. So anyway, I'm available for any other comments and be here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to say anything at all about this application? Anything further from staff?
Just for clarification, so in the plans that are attached, there is one of these shows a kind of a preliminary design for what the approach, because it needs to be a
road
ramp,
approach, yeah.
that there is a wall here, and
Mhm.
this is the on-site improvements. However, in the end, my understanding is they are looking at doing a full road construction, so there will
They
be.
being the applicant.
Sorry?
They
The
being-
the applicant, yes. If they do a full road improvement, that there will probably have to be some walls on the southern side. And although he's not an applicant, I see that the property owner is here today. And so this is more of just of a warning that whether or not the final design of those retaining walls on the south side, which is off-site of this project, it will be part of the discussion that we'll be having with the applicant. So we'll want to make sure that you are involved and aware of that, so that we are not making decisions that affect you without your input. And that's probably more important than the actual idea that there are going to be conditions to build that road.
You mean walls on the south side of the road?
On the south side of the
Got it, okay.
ramp, yes. Otherwise, if it's not a wall, it would have to have a slope easement,
I
and
noticed there's a significant
Yep.
elevation difference between
yep.
them.
So there's a difference between those two, and so we'll either need a slope easement or have him involved in that discussion for design.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from the applicant or the property owner? No? Okay. With that, I'm going to close the hearing, and based on the findings in the staff report, this application does or will comply with the approval criteria subject to the conditions in the staff report. So I will approve the application subject to those conditions. I'll issue my written decision within about 2 weeks, and I will send that to the city. As I noted, if you've testified, you'll be sure and receive a copy of my decision. If you haven't, you can give your name and address to staff, just signing in on the list. Is that sufficient? There's a list at the end of the table there. You can sign that, and they'll add you to the list. That concludes our hearing. Thank you. Mr. Goddard, just for my own edification, in law school, our first year, we had to do big paper, full term, and it was on accretion and avulsion. And in my understanding, when avulsion adds to the property, you get whatever's added, whereas accretion, where the river changes course and goes through the middle, you lose. No, that's right. It's backwards. I'm totally backwards. Now that as I'm saying that, okay, never mind. I thought, well, maybe Washington's different, but no, that's absolutely accurate. As soon as I said it.
It's amazing what planners pick up.